Yes, as winter approaches and the true extent of the housing crisis and its impact on homelessness becomes apparent, it's clear Auckland simply can't respond to the shortage of accommodation. On Tuesday, our morning report, for example, the Salvation Army spoke of having to turn people away. We've got nowhere to send them, Alan Johnson said. The Ministry of Social Development is planning to buy motels but can't guarantee that everyone will be housed this winter, and long-term solutions are coming. But they've been bogged down in politics, confusion about agency responsibility, and a toing and froing between local and central government about land access and consents and all that kind of stuff. In Seattle, they are wrestling with many of the same problems, and whilst they haven't solved them permanently, working from a position that anything is better than sleeping rough or sleeping in a car, they have come up with a temporary solution while the big picture work gets done.
So what we're doing is we're building tiny houses.
Tiny houses. If you're listening, the music is from a video the Low Income Housing Institute has sent us. In short, one of America's 5 wealthiest cities had over 3,000 people sleeping on its streets.
We know that 91 men and women have died on the streets last year.
But as in Auckland, the response was bogged down in politics, confusion, and the mechanics and machinations of consent planning and construction. In Seattle, something had to be done independently, quickly, and cheaply. I called the Institute's CEO, Sharon Lee, who told me it was simple.
We're having these wonderful students, high school students, college students, businesses, volunteers building tiny houses so that homeless people, homeless men, women, and children have a safe place to stay instead of being on the streets or living in their car or, staying in a tent.
The houses are tiny, deliberately so, because they have to be under 120 square feet or 11 square metres. Why?
I don't know if you follow the International Building Code, but the International Building Code essentially says that anything less than 120 square feet is not considered a dwelling unit, like a structure. So you don't technically have to go through the land use code or building code or energy code.
In other words, a tiny house comes with less red tape. Now, that also makes it a less than perfect long-term solution. These aren't permanent family homes, and that's what the Low Income Housing Institute, Lehigh, would prefer to build. But
we got so frustrated because we're about bricks and mortar building affordable housing, like apartment buildings, but it takes 3 or 4 years. And in the meantime, in Seattle, there's over 3,000 men, women, and children who are unsheltered on the streets. This is, we have a, terrible winter. We have rain. It's very cold. This past December, we had 4 people die of hypothermia just sleeping outside.
You get depressed really quickly. And every day, you feel a little bit heavier.
we're back with the Lehigh video again. This is Heather from a tiny house village called Nicholsville. Once homeless, she's outside her tiny house, and the video shows where she lives now. Imagine small cabins from an old-fashioned Kiwi camping ground put on an urban Seattle street. But how do you get the land? Well, first you need consent. Here's Sharon Lee on the phone again.
The mayor and the city council voted to support zoning certain public and private parcels of land so that we could set up the villages. So it's basically a temporary encampment ordinance where a tiny house village can stay for up to 2 years.
And the land itself? Well, Sharon Lee says look around any large western city and there's usually temporary space somewhere if there's a will to use it in such a way.
The villages are on church-owned property, private property, as well as city-owned property. So we're using a site next door to one of the city fire station. We're using a city light, a utility piece of land that's not being used for a village as well.
Remember, these are temporary structures and portable too. The cost under $3,000 a house. Checkpoint has visited very basic emergency accommodation in Auckland, costing well over $1,000 a week. To make it work quickly, cheaply and efficiently, you have to think laterally, says Sharon.
We just had like 20 high school students taking construction training, pre-apprenticeship, vocational training. So they built these fabulous tiny houses.
The other benefit in Seattle has been that when you know where homeless people are, you can provide them with wraparound services. Everyone in a tiny house gets access to social workers, their health is checked, and there are firm house rules.
No alcohol, no drugs, no weapons, no violence. And then the residents meet weekly, and then they agree on certain job duties. Like everybody has a certain job. Someone's working security, someone's working cleaning up the kitchen, someone's working on trash and recycling, things like that.
No one, least of all Lehigh, is saying that this is a perfect answer. But until longer-term solutions are found and made, Seattle had a pressing need and no immediate answer.
So we took it upon ourselves to say, what can we do? It's sort of like guerrilla housing. What could we do that would shelter people so that they're not living in a cold, wet tent?
Sharon Lee from Lehigh in Seattle.